Okay, we're live.
Everybody behave.
We're live.
Es impresionante, pero ya, o sea, hace muchísimo ya como eventos comunitarios y eso, que pues, obviamente el curso ya no puede jugar bien la ya tenemos demasiadas pruebas, se quedó acá, entonces, obviamente cuando es más, son los más pero por tiempo, ¿ves? O sea, ya no puedo, como que antes me decía más o menos mirando, quieres, bueno, en la escuela me pasa mucho, ya tienen niños chiquitos, papás, de esa generación ya creció, son papás, están en las escuelas, y ya uno puede hacer eso, pero también hay gente que se molesta, ¿me entiendes? Porque pues, solamente porque parezco, digamos, de la forma porque una vez en el letrero, están anuncios, y que me quieran, así. Do you happen to know the Wi-Fi password for here?
There's not Wi-Fi.
Oh, there's no Wi-Fi. No Wi-Fi.
Busca Duke Open.
Okay.
Do guest o Duke Open y ya.
Okay. Sí hay Wi-Fi, pero no hay password.
Sí. Está abierto.
Okay.
Si quieres entrar al sistema como una persona aquí, pues es otra cosa.
Oh, no.
No necesitas.
Ok, chévere, gracias. YouTube, got it. Gracias. Cuando cambia de aparatos, porque se me quedaron conectados aparatos en uno. ¿Qué tal?
Disculpen la molestia, ¿puedo tener un...?
¿Un receptor?
¿Sí?
Claro que sí.
¿Se puede?
Adelante. Yay.
Me dijeron que son profesionales.
Hombre, tú evalúa y nos dices.
No. Solo con uno. ¿Dónde lo sirvo?
Dices aquí.
Perfecto. Ya está.
Si quieres le hacemos la prueba.
¿Segunda prueba?
Si escuchas. Sí, si escuchas, estamos aquí en el auditorio. Estamos en el auditorio White en la Universidad de Duke. ¿Por qué no me escuchan?
¿No oyes?
No,
¿Está encendido el suyo?
sí.
A ver.
Yo te empiezo a escuchar, pero con mucha interferencia.
Dale. Sí, va.
A ver, los chiles jalapeños son de Jalapa.
Los chiles jalapeños son de Jalapa.
Este está Este que lo escuchaba justamente. ¿Sabes que cuando le pones el celular se quita también con interferencias? Bien.
¿Sí?
¿Qué pasó? Ok.
Sí. Estamos aquí dispuestos a compartir para eso que yo te quiero hacer. A él hace 15 años.
Sí. Exactamente.
Y tiene todo el derecho de ir.
Sí. Claro.
Muy decepcionado. Y además de eso, si quieres seguir contratando cosas
Claro. Sí, porque el problema no es tanto la compañía, es el sistema, en el sentido de que ellos tienen derecho, como dices tú, a buscar lo que ellos quieran.
Se oye mejor.
That sounds good, right?
Se oye bien.
Okay. All right. Thank you to everyone who's come out on this rainy night for the Immigrant Youth Forum, the first event in a series of events that we've been planning for several months now. My name is Jill Anderson. I'm Mellon visiting professor here at the Center for Latin American Studies, Latin American Caribbean Studies. And I'm also co-director and co-founder of allá, Otros in Mexico City. And we're actually going to translate. So, Diana.
Hola, buenas noches. Bienvenidos a todos al foro de jóvenes para hablar sobre la inmigración. Y claro, yo no soy Jill Anderson, yo soy Diana Méndez. Y les doy la bienvenida a nombre del programa en español de Roman Studies y de todos los otros sponsors que están apoyando estos dos eventos, desde esta noche y de mañana todo el día.
So tomorrow we'll be in the same room from 9 to 5, and we have panelists from the Migration Policy Institute, from coming all the way from Florida, coming all the way from Veracruz, from El Paso, to share the various realities and consequences of the current immigration debate in the U.S., and particularly in a transnational context. So looking at what's happening in Mexico and the responses in Mexico and the experiences post-deportation in Mexico.
Bueno, queremos agradecer a todos nuestros invitados. No sé si se pueden levantar y mostrarnos quiénes son. Por favor, invitados, our guests, can stand up. Bueno, un aplauso para ellos. bueno, que van a estar hablando de los temas tan importantes como la inmigración, la deportación y las implicaciones transnacionales de esta situación que estamos viviendo ahora.
So I quickly want to read through the list of our amazing sponsors: the Duke Center for Plaques, the support from the Office of Global Affairs and the Hanscom Endowment, the Duke Center for International and Global Studies, the Spanish Language Program, the Duke Human Rights Center, the Franklin Humanities Institute, the Forum for Scholars in Public, the Keenan Institute for Ethics, Duke Service Learning, Otros in Acción, the Fine American UNC-Chapter, who will be leading the discussion tonight, along with Alerta Migratoria and the UNC-Chapel Coalition. So thank you to all of you guys. Muchas gracias por hacer esto posible. And with that, I'm going to turn over. Oh no, first we have servicios de interpretación. I'm going in the bilingual mode to speed it up. We have interpretation services here at the back. You can, thank you, raise their hands. You can go with Jackie or Angie and get earphones for those who would like them today and tomorrow.
Quiero decir muchas gracias a todos, muchas gracias a Angie y a Jackie, y por si acaso Angie me ha ayudado hace tiempo. Bueno, bienvenidos a todos.
Entonces hay para interpretación, aquí hay equipos, y ahora doy la palabra a Maggie y a turn over the mic to Maggie.
Hey guys, thank you for coming. Great turnout.
Veo muchas caras que conozco.
Features from Riverside. It's great to have them here and just all of you guys supporting. So, my name is Acción. We're kind of reestablished the Fine American organization, UNC-Chapel this year, and I'll let Matt introduce just her name.
Yes, my name is Maggie Loreto. I am part of Otros in Acción, which we are based in Mexico City, and I'm really excited to be here.
Alright, so we're going to start off kind of with some videos to introduce ourselves as students, and then we'll have some people coming up, and we're going to have two groups speaking, and of course we'll start with the video.
Americans really are about citizenship and about seek your dreams. I think like the American spirit is just like striving for excellence and finding the pursue my dreams, even as a child, to define and pursue your passions. A sense that you belong in America, more so than just like citizenship status.
The journey of coming from the different countries.
Americans have an opportunity to pursue my dreams, even as a child to immigrants. American to me is not about citizenship, but about being able to pursue your dreams. I think like the American spirit is like striving for excellence. Define and pursue your passions. A sense that you belong in America, more so than just like citizenship status.
The journey of coming from the different country and trying to achieve achieve the American dream. I'm here today to announce that the program known as DACA that was effectuated under the Obama administration is being rescinded.
DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, is basically a two-factor court card that gives us 2 years to kind of work and study legally here in the United States. It gives young dreamers the opportunity to be in this country, the only country they know as home, without fearing deportation, and it gives them a little sense of security, even though it's not a permanent solution. This country is willing to protect them so that they can continue their existence.
What Washington is doing right now is basically spinning the faces of all those who had hope at one point.
The current implications of Washington's actions with DACA is that it leaves dreamers with a sense of insecurity. They don't know what's going to happen to them. They don't know if tomorrow they'll be deported or not. And it just leaves them kind of without knowing what their future has for them.
Many times, if you're a student, basically your family has relied on you to be that one who succeeds. And if you're the one in your family that now has the success compared to everyone else, or besides that younger sibling, you know, that responsibility that you're like trying to take on the success that you have by being a student is basically, again, undermined in a couple months, in a month. It could mean nothing because you can't give it a work with them.
Well, I may have a bunch of opportunities now at currently. So it's very much like a future-oriented place, and because of things that have been happening recently, it's very hard to predict the future. On top of your game, if you don't quite know what's going to happen.
In order to show that Duke truly supports the institution, training faculty and staff and increase mental health resources dedicated for non-commissioned students to show that we are really supported here. Having to create a scholarship for undocumented students here on campus would be incredible. It'll show that Duke supports the education of dreamers here on campus.
What Duke has done is that they've now qualified undocumented students as domestic, and I think that was going to be a huge important first step. Now that that's said, ultimately it's official, I think Duke needs to also promote that. There are scholarships that they can partner with, and one of the biggest ones, especially in the North Carolina, South Carolina area, is Golden Door. I'm personally a Golden Door recipient, and I think just the Duke being in those programs or scholarships that support DACA students is something that at least allows students who are applying to be aware that Duke is an option.
It's still not over. We had this overwhelming amount of phone calls happening when DACA was in September, but still you see that underrepresented sending back some emails as all of this to show that we want Congress to pass the contribution for dreamers. So people should know that the undocumented conversation isn't just about dreamers and us. Like, yes, we overcome obstacles to be at a place like Duke, but it's also about our parents. They often don't speak up for themselves because they don't know English or they're afraid to speak up. They shouldn't be left out of this conversation because they're the true original dreamers, and without them, we wouldn't succeed.
Students aren't aware that DACA students are here at Duke, so it's not an issue that's distant and far or some statistic on whatever news it's going on. It's about student lives on campus. And so, when we do events, we try to educate people about the issues, come out and show your support. Because that not only shows us students struggling with us, it also shows the administration that the student body cares about this issue, and when we demand something, something will be done. It's problematic, and so I will try to see if we can just Jack, everybody
Si
here,
puedo
especially
hablar
back
sin
there? We're good?
micrófono.
All right, so that was kind of an introduction.
Esta fue una
We're
introducción
Define American
de nuestra
chapter and
delegación de
stemming from the
Define
work of
American
Paul
Chapter.
a lot actually in terms of media, in terms of
Queremos
kind of
agradecer
taking
por
different
todas
narratives
las
and trying to tell people's stories so that people know how much of a human issue this is. And so what we started doing here at Duke
Hemos
is
empezado a
talking to
hacer
and started talking to some of us,
con
who had your undocumented or documented status, and maybe provide resources. And for that, we came together as students
nos reunimos
kind of work on the issue to ourselves,
para
or
elaborar en este tema,
activism,
darnos
or just kind of telling our stories amongst ourselves, so that others like us to know that we have
dar
someone
a saber
around
estas
us that
historias de gente
talk
como
to and
nosotros
have a conversation about the issues that
para
are
poder
going on.
tener una
And
conversación
so now
sobre
this
este
kind
tema.
of last semester we went to
El
DC,
semestre pasado fuimos a
represented
Washington, D.C., hicimos carrera con algunos
building
legisladores,
leadership, and so now we're doing this
donde estamos haciendo
engage with
esta
the community and
reunión.
ask people to
Le
support
pedimos a la
listen
gente
to
que
the
nos
stories,
apoye,
and have
que nos dé
people
más
aware that
historias,
this is
para que la población esté consciente de que esto está sucediendo.
And so, and the flip side of that is kind of nagging, and that we talk about, being where we're having experience in the United States, but once someone leaves, there's a story there, and I think that's what we have from Maggie and here.
Yeah, I just want to add really quickly that the reason why we're having this technical situation is because we're trying to connect people in Mexico City that are part of all the things that are done during the physical phase that we have in Mexico
que están
City
en la
for the
Ciudad de
house.
México,
And
están en un lugar que se llama
Iván and
Ocho
Rosie and
House,
everybody's listening there, not
y todos
only
ellos están escuchando.
they're listening and looking at us, and they
Nos
were
están
supposed
viendo.
to be here in person, but
Ellos
they're
se supone que deberían
not.
venir,
So in the beginning, I am here
Enrique y yo estamos aquí
representing Mona and
en
Portugal, but also
representación
representing
de
their voices, talking about the context and why they're
Estamos
not
hablando
present.
del contexto y por qué no están aquí, porque ellos fueron invitados, pero su
Part of
visa
our role
fue
today.
denegada.
And with that, we were kind of, this is a formal conversation,
Foros, una
and we're
conversación,
having students come up and
vamos a pedir a los
combination of allies,
alumnos,
of local groups and
los
also
representantes de
here.
otros
So we're
grupos
going
de
to
acción,
have Elizabeth and
vamos a
Enrique,
pedir a Elizabeth,
Jolie,
Joseph
Marco,
y Marco.
you guys can come and join us.
¿Se pueden venir?
Daniela,
¿Y Daniela?
all right, so kind of, we're going to talk about this in sort of themes. It's really difficult conversations.
Es una conversación
But
difícil,
maybe I think what we're hoping to get is through the experience of what
pero queremos
you've
escuchar las
what they
experiencias
experience. I think
de
that
cada
there's an
uno.
element of what really makes it really hard. So kind of the first thing is,
La primera
it's about the, the politics. I think you see always on the news, DACA immigration, and currently, all of DACA, but immigration has been something
que
going
la
on for
migración es algo que
decades
se
now.
ha
And so,
discutido durante
first of all,
décadas.
we're going to start with a quick 30-second kind of introduction about
Quiero
what is
hacerles
your
una pregunta.
involvement in your organization and
¿Cuál es su participación en la
what
organización
experience you have.
y la experiencia que han tenido?
You go from there, 30 seconds.
¿Pueden comenzar?
My name is Marco
Me
Gonzalez,
llamo
and
Marco.
I'm a
Estoy en mi primer año aquí en
graduate
Duke.
student.
You give him a microphone,
Yeah,
please.
my name is Jolie. I was born in the United States, however, my parents and my brothers were born in Mexico. And then I also kind of just got involved with Define American.
Everyone, good evening. My name is Marco Cervantes. I'm 24 years old, and I'm documented at the moment. But my experience within the community was I was part of a youth group, an undocumented-led youth group, and I'm currently part of North Carolina Dream Coalition.
I'm Daniela. I'm a part of Alerta Migratoria. We are a group. Viridiana is actually walking here. She's also part of the group. We work with folks. We have a hotline And folks call us when, for example, they don't know what happened to their brother, he just got picked up, their mom is locked up, they don't know what to do. Someone was just picked up in a raid, like the case of Walden Acosta here in Durham. And we work publicly to stop those deportations. And we've been successful at doing this. And that's it.
Hey everyone, my name is Elizabeth Barahona. I'm a senior here. My sophomore year, along with the Latino community, we organized to change that policy so that undocumented students can be given need-blind financial aid and be received as domestic students. And so the next year we had 20 new undocumented students on campus. Folks that helped with that policy and that movement are sitting here with us. And so seeing the need for organizing, I met with Marcos and I met with Anna and Axel over the summer, and we helped found the Define American advocacy group last semester.
Hello everybody, my name is Enrique Rojas. I help with Otros, Acción. I met Jill and Maggie about 3 years ago, and I've been trying to help do whatever I can, whenever I can to help. Back in Mexico City, of course.
Oh, hi, I'm Viridiana Martinez, and I am the director of Alerta Migratoria, and I am a DACA recipient, and I've come out of the shadows since 2009. Staying active.
All right, so I think we can just kind of go around to, we'll ask a question and each of you maybe has an answer. You could just share. This kind of part is very much politics. Like we're talking about DACA now, we're in under the Trump administration, but I wanted to touch a little bit on kind of the history of what had been going on throughout the Obama administration. Previous movements of Dreamers and Dream Act, and I don't know if some of you that have been working on this issue a little longer, if you wanted to talk about it, Didi or Monaco.
I wasn't that much involved within the DREAM Act. I'm a little more involved with possible legislation for something that will address the DACA or undocumented population currently in the United States. But I know some people that have, like Viridiana Martinez.
Thanks, Marco. Yeah, so I first came out about my immigration status in 2009, and 2010 was the last time that the DREAM Act was brought up for a vote. And if you remember, there were Democrats that actually voted against that bill, including our own Senator Kay Hagan. And so, well, former senator. So before she actually, whenever she was running for re-election, we decided, we were going to call her out. And so we got these billboards. And the billboard said, Senator Kay Hagan, she's not a friend of immigrants. And the whole point was that, politicians of either party know that, we're not going to stand for your pretty words. You gotta actually do for us. You can't just tell us, oh, no, it's the other guy that's doing bad for you. And that's what Kay Hagan would say about Tom Tillis. Oh, no, look at Tom Tillis. And we're like, well, no, look at you. What are you doing for us? And so that happened in 2014. In 2010, though, I do remember that in 2010, we were pushing for a standalone DREAM Act, just like a lot of folks have been hearing now, a clean DREAM Act. Well, in 2010, we did the same. You know what? It failed. And I know that we didn't have the same support and the same public backing as there is now, and awareness as there is about Dreamers and DACA recipients and, our plight. But at the end of the day, I think that what is very clear to me is that politicians, they will say from either party, will say what they want to win our support and win our votes. And what we need to do is to hold them accountable. And we can't, just because somebody is a Republican, we can't assume that they're not going to support us, because you'd be surprised how many Republican congressional offices actually will at least make an inquiry about people facing deportation, something that Democrat offices will often not do. And so a lot of stuff is, you know, what we see people saying in cameras and what is actually happening behind the scenes is not always the same thing. And so I don't know, I think it's awesome that, you know, there are more voices, that there are younger, fresher faces like Axel, who was freaking like, no, you're not gonna shut me up, like I'm here. And that is what we need. So thank you for your support.
Marco, I don't know if you want to talk about kind of the issue of DACA being on the spotlight, but you yourself aren't part of that movement.
Yeah, so I do not have the DACA status because I met all the requirements except for one, which was the time that you must have been here. So it was for people who came into the US before January 2010, and I came in August 2010. So for months I missed it. But all the other requirements I met. But so I've been living all this time without DACA status. And I believe DACA does help a lot because I've seen I have friends that have DACA, and I see they can get a license. I see they can get a job because they have Social Security. And while for me, it was harder because I would always have to depend on other people to transport me and on other people to get like money or whatever. So I definitely think DACA is a great thing that I wish I could have get as well. So I think one of the main points in this fight is to not only bring back DACA back, but also expand it to cover more people than it has before that also deserve it as well.
I think it's important to note that DACA itself, like, it wasn't Obama saying, yeah, like, here, you know, this gift for the supporter base, that, like, it was students who took over his office, it was students that sat in, you know, it was students that demanded that something be done for them. And so it was almost forced on him to take an action, you know, he didn't do it willingly. And so it's a reminder that, like, we're here and we're organizing because nothing is going to be, like, given to us. Like, everything, like, even on Duke's campus, like, the undocumented status, like, the organizing, everything is, like, organizing, everything is student run, everything is people run, and, like, we can't expect them to give us anything. Like, everything we have to work for, you know, and that's what Alerta Migratoria is about, you know, like, demanding justice, and because we have to demand it. It's not going to be.
The next question is kind of the impact of, you know, rhetoric of words, and this is something that has a long history. You talk about kind of what the term illegal alien means, if you want to talk about right now, more current chain migration. And so I wanted to just, I don't know, Josie, if you have something to say, and also Enrique, kind of from the viewpoint of Mexico, and like kind of how people talk, how Mexico becomes this topic in immigration that's very kind of negative. And so I don't know what you guys feel from over there, or Maggie, if you have something. Sorry.
I think we can both put in something, but yeah, I mean, and before continuing, I just want to remind everybody that we have interpretation. If you need Spanish, you can feel free to use it. We didn't answer in Spanish. Sí, perdón, pero sí lo as far as, yeah, the Dream Act and the word dreamer in Mexico, and you hear it now, I mean, because of sort of the Trump effect that it has given in Mexico as well, but it's also important to acknowledge that there's been deportations for many years now, and that there's an entire community, in this case, Oda and Pochaha, we've been there for over 10 years, and there's people getting deported and returned, but right now, in the Mexican, in the country in Mexico, you can only hear, oh yeah, the dreamer, but we don't really know in Mexico or society or even the government know who a dreamer is. What's the history of that? Where was that born? What is DACA? What is the difference of that? So I think that's important to highlight. And of course, that's attached with the lack of policies, the lack of, I mean, really necessary attention in the everyday life. And there needs to be even bigger transformations, structural transformations that can allow the family to reunite in Mexico, to establish, I mean, recognizing that our families had to leave the country. And right now, I mean, we go back to Mexico, and sadly, I mean, many of the states and the places, the conditions are the same as how our parents left. So I think it's important to talk about that, and to also say that the lucha continues on that side as well, and that we're fighting for mobility, we're fighting to be with our families, we're not giving up on that. And I think here, this is an example of how we need to work together as, you could say, former dreamers and dreamers or DACA or whatever. I mean, we lived here and grew up, and we share a lot of the things, but I think there is a disconnection between us and between the countries. But I think it's now more important than ever to work together, to unite forces. If you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I just want to add a little bit to that. I returned myself to Mexico in 2011. They passed the Dream Act in 2012. I actually left because I was a little bit tired of nothing happening. I wanted to do something with my life. So yeah, so that part of Dream Act, I don't think it stops. I don't think, like Maggie said, you know, in Mexico, you don't know, or people don't know where it got defined or how the Dreamers came about. But I think that it's important to also mention that just because people are in Mexico, that doesn't mean that they're not dreaming anymore. You know, there's a lot of work to do. Like you said, with politics, especially now, it's the same thing down there. They want to take advantage of it, just like they take advantage over here. You know, making leverage or whatever. They do the same thing down there. So I think it's very important to raise that topic and to let people know that there is a community down there. There is people down there that they can have a community where they can interact and we can understand each other, because a lot of us already went through all that. So I think it's important too.
Could you highlight some of that, especially like the reactions of the Mexican government for either retornados or just people coming back into the country? Just like specific, like either policies or things that they do or don't do to help people out.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as I mentioned, many years ago, there was nothing. I went back in 2008 and nobody knew about deportation or return, not even the government or not even society in Mexico. And nowadays, as I said, because of the Trump effect, there's things that have been going on, very little things, but also acknowledging that there are things that grassroots organizations and individuals have been fighting for many years, including the revalidation of U.S. studies. As of March or April of last year, the GED is now revalidated in Mexico. And before that, Mexico did not recognize the GED. So if you were back in Mexico and you had a GED, you could not even get a job because you didn't have high school. You couldn't continue your higher education because you didn't have a high school. And now, because of a huge battle of many years of individuals and organizations, including ODA and others, we were there pushing it, and there were changes to the norms, and now people can revalidate high school and GED and even higher education. Of course, there's a lot of work to implement it at the state level and keep telling people that they can do it, but that's an example. But at the same time, one of the activities that ODA does is go to the airport once a week, because there's an average of 450 people that arrive to the Mexican International Airport in Mexico City, deported. And we can see there that there really isn't any policies that will support these people in emergency need. There's no shelter right now. We had to deal with 2 people that they had gone through violence. And I mean, it's just an example of the things that it's clear that the government has not responded for shelter, for getting your identity documents. You go back to Mexico and you find yourself undocumented in the country because they don't accept your Mexican passport that was given here at the consulate. They don't accept your INE. They don't accept your hoja de repatriación. And I think there's an example of how we can work together to push and demand the Mexican consulates also from here that they accept all of these documents. And I think there's a lot that we could talk about what is lacking in the Mexican government, but also a lot about what society and especially the community of people that have been returned or deported are doing on that side.
It's a lot, and I think this is something that we don't think about on this end because, you know, like these are the effects of, you know, this is kind of what we're trying to, in one way, avoid, but it's something that we also would have to, you know, address to help those who have been deported. You can't just, you know, be, oh, they're gone, and then there's nothing to be said about that. Josie, I wanted to kind of give you a little chance to talk about just a little more here in the United States context of, you know, chain migration. What does illegal alien mean?
how do those things kind of like, affect how we talk about immigration?
Yeah, so I come from the state of Arkansas, which is a southern state. And one of the things that I was like, when you perceive an illegal immigrant, the image in your head that you get is not of a person who spent most of their life or has sacrificed their life coming to the United States. Instead, you perceive an alien because of that word, right? And so it's one of the things that I know Define American is attempting to do, and others are attempting to do as well, is change the narrative of that tone. Some identify as undocumented Americans, which I know. So my brother came to the United States at 3 years old, so I can speak kind of on his behalf. I know we've had instances where we go to a place. We went to a Mexican store to buy one of my other brothers like a Mexican jersey for Christmas because he loved it and he really wanted it. And the guy goes, "Oh, where are you guys from?" And although he was born in Mexico, we're from here. We're from here in Arkansas. We spent our entire lives here. He's like 27 now, and he identifies as American, right? The term undocumented American oftentimes fits a lot of undocumented Americans better than the term illegal alien, which makes them sound to a foreigner to a country that they've known their entire lives. And then the word chain migration in and of itself, I see some heads shaking. I completely agree. So the word, another term, well, the term it actually is family reunification, which is a legal term that I don't know too much about, but I do know that it's essentially what granted people the opportunity to bring in family members, which kind of makes sense, right? Where I see people shaking their heads, like, so the concept of family reunification is essentially how my family got to come to the United States. My father, under amnesty, got under the Reagan amnesty, he got papers, and then through family reunification was able to bring his wife and his 3 sons. Right, and I don't think that's a concept of chain migration. I think that's more, and we use the rhetoric of chain migration to make it sound like, oh, I'm going to bring my cousin now, and I'm going to bring that one Theo from like, that's two people separated from me, but he's my Theo, and that's not how it works. Like, family reunification already has like, I think it works immediate family only. Is that brothers, sisters? So it's only immediate family already. Like, the fact that it's called chain migration isn't a concept that actually like works in the sense that like I'm gonna bring that cousin that I used to know that one time, which is the rhetoric that's painted today.
Can I ask you how long it took?
Oh, yeah, you can, because so my parents came to the United States before I was born. I was born in '97. They came around '94, and when my mom and my brothers came through a visa and stayed, right? And so they overstayed their visas. And in overstaying their visas, while all of this was happening, my father applied for them to become legal residents, like he was. I was born in '97. I still remember visiting Mexico around 6 or 7 years old with just my dad and my little sister, because my dad was the only one that could travel back and forth with my sister and I. It took my mom and my 3 brothers about 10 years to become legal residents within the United States. And this was like prior to 9/11.
Yeah. A lot of people with the chain migration term think that it's going to be immediate, that it can happen within a year or 2, but no, the reality is now after certain events, the government has become more strict, and the term limit reaches about 15 years, maybe more, and you also have to have the collateral to be able to do all of this process.
So I think one of the last things to talk about and to transition a little bit to more just personal stories and experiences of other dreamers kind of within the group is kind of for you guys, Migratoria, we were at an event recently, a few weeks ago, and we had some attorneys speaking, and I think there's been a lot of changes with the Trump administration, how that's not necessarily like things that have been advised, but just how the environment is. It changes how even the courts have, and also just in general, the area of North Carolina or the South can be harsher in many ways to immigrants or those detained. So from your work with Alerta Migratoria, with people detained, people having court cases, kind of what are some of the challenges that have been faced in especially court cases or asylum cases?
To be honest with you, I can't really say that I have seen any difference in how asylum cases are still handled just as harshly as they were before. Every case in terms of adjustment of status or any affirmative application for immigration relief, I haven't heard of anything strange. What I do know is happening now that wasn't happening before is the implementation of something called prosecutorial discretion. And prosecutorial discretion is basically the authority that a judge or an immigration officer has to just take their hands off of somebody, right? Just saying, okay, I know you're illegal, but I see your profile here. You've been living here for a long time. You have U.S. citizen kids. You've been paying your taxes. So I'm not going to touch you. I'm just going to let you go home. That is not happening anymore. And it was happening under the Obama administration. However, the one part that people fail to forget when talking about this is that when Obama first entered office, prosecutorial discretion was also not implemented. And there were lots of memos. There's a lot of, you can look up things like the Morton memo, which was like from back in 2011. The Morton memo established priorities for deportations. And basically the Morton memo said, if you have not been convicted of a crime, then you're low priority for removal for deportation. And so the Morton memo, though, was not really applied. And so that's what took a few of us in 2012 to infiltrate detention centers. And I was one of them, to again show the hypocrisy of the Obama administration saying, we are not removing, we are not deporting low priority for deportation, and yet you have entire detention centers where you're holding people without criminal records. So how can you tell the cameras, Mr. President, that you're not deporting people who don't have criminal records, but you have entire detention centers filled with those people? And so that is what we saw at the beginning of the Obama administration. We had to fight tooth and nail until prosecutorial discretion became the norm. And what we started seeing was officers just saying, okay, I'm not gonna deport you. I've gotten this request to let you go, and I will let you go because based on this request from your attorney or from an organization or an email from an advocate, Viridiana, telling me and showing me all this info about you, I'm gonna lay my hands off and I'm gonna let you go. And what is happening is we're back at point A, where we have to fight tooth and nail again so that that same prosecutorial discretion can be implemented. And like I said, it sucks, right? It sucks for those of us that are advocates and those of us that are on the ground having to do this, watching this happen. Again, we have to start from point A. But I've heard in a lot of these panels, when people talk about prosecutorial discretion and how people are no longer getting stays of removal and how people are being picked up in their check-ins when they go to their ICE check-ins. And I remember, well, did you forget what happened at the beginning of the Obama administration? Because at the beginning of the Obama administration, it was the same fight. It was the same fight. And again, it's proof of how important organizing is and why us as Alerta, we feel such a huge void. And I'm always shocked at how much, it's so obvious that what we're doing is effective and it's needed. And there's more people, we need way more people because the organizing component is so important. The law is simply not enough to protect immigrants. The law is not enough. If that was the case, you would not have people that are afraid for their lives being deported. You would not have people like Wilden Acosta picked up on his way to school by the Obama administration. You would not have that happen, and yet you had it happen. So again, the law is not enough. People have to care, and we have to organize.
I don't know, Maggie and Mika, if you asked from the people you work with, the group, some experiences to just finish off, especially with deportation or just kind of if people have been detained, kind of the trauma that they have to take over now to
Yeah, I mean, definitely. As I said, it starts from here, of course, and in the moment that I know a lot of organizations and a lot of people are working really hard to stop those deportations, to prevent them, and of course, we are against any forced mobility from anywhere. And I think on the other side, we definitely see that effect when we're not able to stop a deportation in the process of being in the detention center and all of the violations to their human rights that occur in that detention center. I mean, many of you, I know that you're aware of, I mean, how they're in these cold places, how they're moved from one detention to another, how right now specifically we're dealing with a situation where people get deported and they can't recover their belongings. And we're working with the consulate, with the Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores in Mexico, but they don't tell, there's no number that you can track them down. They don't tell you where the package or where their stuff is at. They direct us to the consulate to the detention center, and it's an entire mess. And we know as well that in the detention centers, their Mexican documents sometimes get destroyed, and they don't have even an ID or a matrícula consular or something that they can use when they arrive to Mexico. They don't have anything, they can't even get money out from their family members because they don't have an ID. And the document that they give them, which is called in Spanish, hoja de repatriación, the banks don't recognize it. Nobody recognizes it in Mexico except Somos Mexicanos, which is the entidad that gives it. And I mean, just that, imagine arriving to Mexico, a country you haven't seen in 10, 20, or however many years, and you arrive to the airport with a big, like kind of a big postal in orange with no shoelaces, through the last door in the airport, that's basically where the trash is almost. And obviously you're criminalized, and you arrive after being detained months or even years, and you arrive and you don't know anybody, you only have a sandwich, a bunch of flyers, and what do? I mean, there's no shelter, maybe you don't know anybody, maybe you take longer to call your relatives or connect with your family in the US here. And I think that's something that other organizations, grassroots like Deportación en la lucha, all that, we go, they arrive on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and we go on Thursdays. Rosie goes and others, and you basically lend them your phone so that they can make calls. You give them shoelaces. You're there waiting for them and waiting with them until their relatives finally arrive to the airport, or if they go to the bus station to take their buses to another state. There's other needs as well. We lend them our emails or our IDs to get money out, to cash dollars or all that sort of stuff. But I think that's important to talk about it. And on this side, as I said, there's a lot we can do with the consulates. There's a lot of organizing that we can do with our families that are being deported, that are arriving, and a lot of things that we can call out on the government, like as I said, the IDs, the passports, like, why should we get them here if they're going to arrive to Mexico and they're not going to work? So that's just an example of all these things that happen in the deportation.
Thank you guys for sharing.
Thank you.
This is awesome. There's always obviously much more we can talk. I'm sure any of these could talk to you for hours, but we're gonna kind of switch up a little bit. We're gonna have some other students share with us, and I think maybe. So you wake up.
Also, I promised I was paying attention. I'm live tweeting, so if y'all want to follow Alerta Migratoria on Twitter. Marco. You want to sit here?
Hoy en la época hay comida. Sí. Se va con qué para cenar, con qué.
Alright guys, so we're gonna have the other group come up. We're still working, trying to get connected with them so that we can speak, and then hopefully we get it, and towards the end we can speak with them. But for now, we're gonna get Esperanza, Salvador, and Ashley, you can come up as well. And Taylor or Lauren, if you guys want to come up. And Antonio. So hopefully we get to give them really is the mics that are issues, but we're going to start kind of with this group, and what we want to share is a little bit of more of the experiences that and why people get involved, and why in this kind of time, a lot of youth that have to take action, that have to kind of stand up to the system, stand up to the status quo, and do something about things. And so, first of all, the main thing is I want to have you guys introduce yourself and kind of why you got involved with, I guess, this group, Define American, and we'll see if we get to hear from Rossi and Ivan. But yeah, so we can start with you, Antonio.
Buenas noches, everybody. Good evening. My name is Antonio Lopez.
Louder.
Yeah. Well, I graduated a couple years ago, but I got involved because I represent the generation of Latinos who are citizens, have that blessing, and we don't take advantage of it. Not just in terms of mobility, but also just helping our family. I have primos hermanos who live with us their entire lives, and they went back to Mexico on the quickness. And what do we do about them? Do I continue my life at Duke University, or do I just? So when I saw that Axel and Anna and so many others were doing work at Define American, I had an obligation because I had papers, as we say, because I come from a certain tradition of activism, a tradition of people Hispanoblantes, to use my privilege, to use my voice, to use my maleness, to help use the knowledge that I have with this university, the way it operates, and just make sure that they don't reinvent the wheel, helping activists to transmit that knowledge and understanding. So thank you for having me here, but that's all I'll say for that.
Hi everyone, my name is Taylor Correa White. I am a freshman, and the reason why I care so much is because I'm a personal believer that you don't have to personally identify with a struggle to care about a struggle. I believe that when it comes to movements like this, having representation from all groups of people is what actually creates a difference, because it shows that it affects all communities, not just one community. So being a Black person and just showing my face here, I think does a lot to show the Latino community that I care, and that there are other Black students on campus that care too, and that should care and have the obligation to do something as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Owens, a sophomore. I echo a lot of what Taylor said, but also I just want to add, one reason that I got involved with Define American is because you hear so much rhetoric and news, and I think it's very distant, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to get to hear stories that go against the narrative of what our country likes to put out there, and kind of get closer to what the struggles are, what people are going through,
Ashley Murray. I'm a freshman here at Duke. And I come from an area in the South Carolina, where the area is primarily immigrants. So I grew up surrounded by this issue. And I also don't think the question is, why am I involved? It's more like, why are you not involved? Because being a white woman, I have a lot of privilege. And if I don't use this privilege, then there's no, what are you doing?
I'm Esperanza, and I'm a first year, and I became involved because when I started applying to college, I really came to terms with what my undocumented identity meant. And when I got to Duke, I realized I had this privilege and a voice, and my mom has kept her voice, like she hasn't been able to speak up on this issue. So when I finally got here, I wanted to be able to speak not only on my behalf, because the person that affects me, but on my family's behalf, because they can't speak up for themselves, because they're in a different situation and they live day by day trying to make ends meet. So now that I'm privileged to be here, I feel like I should use my voice.
Hello everyone, my name is Salvador Chavarriano. I'm a first year as well, and I mirror a lot what Esperanza said. I really got involved, especially with the Pan American, ever since the September 5th announcement. Just inside me just exploded, and I was like, no, that's enough. I have to do something. I have to speak out. And so I'm glad to be up here with everyone and hopefully discuss the matters that we will.
Well, thank you guys. Can you guys still hear me at least? We're good? All right. So kind of the first question is, how are you limited in the United States as an undocumented individual, and especially Esperanza and Salvador, if you can kind of talk about what it means of DACA versus not DACA, or just undocumented. I know Salvador, Marco touched on this, but if you guys could elaborate how you're limited in day-to-day life or education.
I think the biggest thing is like separation from my family, because I can't travel back to where I'm from. And so even though I moved here when I was 2 years old, you still always know that you have family in Mexico. And just knowing that, you know, my grandma is aging, and like knowing that you can't go back and see her, and like my grandpa passed away and I wasn't able to go back and see him. And just knowing that it's a flight away, but you can't go and see them, I think has been the hardest thing for my family. Just because my family's pretty split half and half, like half are undocumented in the US and half are in Mexico, and they can't come here. And I think that's been the hardest thing on me. And then I think applying to college is where I really noticed like how I was limited as an undocumented immigrant. I realized like, oh, I have to pay out-of-state tuition, and I can't afford that, and I don't get financial aid from UNC was my dream school, and when I saw, oh, I don't get financial aid, I can't afford that. So just, I think, and then like summer opportunities, you can't travel abroad, you just have to stay to domestic opportunities. I think that's when it kind of really hits you what it means.
Well, for me, I would say first that my situation is a little bit different. In most immigrant family situations, usually the older siblings are the ones that are documented, and then the younger ones are the ones who are U.S. citizens. In my family's case, it's reversed. I have two older sisters, they're 24 and 21, and they were born in the United States. But because of a family issue, my mom had to go back, and I was born over there just by chance. So I will say that I haven't had, like, I have to explain the responsibility as much, because my older sisters who were born here, they took a lot of, like, you know, putting the house in their name, all the utilities. But what I will say that Mary's responses was applying to colleges, because in my school, everyone's like, oh, you have all these grades, you're going to get all these offers and stuff like that. I was like, no, the only thing that's stopping me is a piece of paper that says I was born. And so I remember when I applied to one scholarship, and I even asked them, are DACA students allowed? And like, well, as long as you're legal in the United States, you're good, you should be fine. I'm like, okay, technically, I am legally present. And so I applied, and when I got a response back, it just really shattered me, because it wasn't, oh, we just don't think you were academically fit, or you don't have the extracurriculars. The reason was you are not an American citizen, and so you can't get the scholarship. And so
it would have been a lot better if they would have just said, oh yeah, you can get it because of academics, but because of something that I can't control has been a really big challenge for me to accept. And so it's definitely one of the reasons that I decided to be part of the primary faculty.
And so I just wanted to kind of add a couple more points to what they were saying, especially in regards to education. So there's the big issue that any undocumented person in North Carolina specifically cannot receive in-state tuition. But if you make it to more specific about DACA recipients, we can get a license here in the state, but due to basically a memo that was sent by the Attorney General, now Governor Roy Cooper, to the legislature administration, we are not allowed to get in-state tuition. And so this is not the case in Virginia, where the argument by the Attorney General's office over there was that they could get in-state tuition. So, there's discrepancies all around, and then, here in North Carolina, it's kind of a little bit harsh, and then it gets even worse if you go to Georgia, where even documented students and undocumented students are banned completely from their basically top 5 state colleges. So, there is a lot of discrimination in this country, and sometimes based on, documentation or kind of legal presence or status, a lot of discrimination happens, and we just kind of overlook it sometimes, or just accept it as the status quo, which is kind of something we're trying to change. And then the other thing I was going to touch, especially the issue with licenses or being able to get that as an undocumented person, is that happened in 2006 here in North Carolina, and they decided that a person who was undocumented could not receive a license. And the implication of that is probably the harshest one, is that they have used that to their advantage to do checkpoints or to stop someone on either a light or even a speeding ticket. And from that checkpoint, from that stop, not having a license then produces the person to maybe after a few times, or maybe after the one time, depending on the officer and their discretion, that person gets either detained. Once they're detained and they go to the jail, and then that enters them into the system, and then ICE gets notified, and then we have deportations. And so even if you look at Wake County, a lot of the history with that, with programs about working with the federal government and ICE or secure communities, that's what they've been using, traffic stops, checkpoints, to really deport people, not, criminal activity, whatever you define criminal as. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to add a little bit to that. And so, kind of this is more open to most of you guys. Like, how does, similar to the question we asked before, how does what's been talked about in terms of like the language used, how the rhetoric used for allies and for Esperanza or something like, how does that affect you? How does that relate to kind of some other issues that you guys either face, or like in terms of calling immigrants bad, calling names to Mexicans, or calling, again, chain migration, illegal aliens? How does that affect like you on campus, or seeing in the news, or kind of you personally, if it's attacking kind of basically your identity?
I think, well, my biggest thing with that is that a lot of juniors are kind of getting a lot of support now, and like those who have like are deciding to go to like school and like get educated and see these opportunities. But a lot of like we're valuing this support at the expense of our parents, because they've been like this, like kind of like the rhetoric is like, oh, like it's not their fault, like they didn't make the choice to come here, someone brought them. But by like using that dialogue, you're blaming my mom for making the choice to bring me here, and I think that's what concerns me, because blaming the person who has sacrificed everything to bring me here, and like just I don't want, like, my fear is that something will be done for people like me at the expense of our parents, who are the ones who did everything to get us here.
To what Francis was saying, something about DACA that's so important to realize that it represents a small segment of the undocumented population in the United States. I think there are over 11 million undocumented people in this country, right? So a lot of them don't qualify for DACA. And And that's not the expense, that's not the fault of DACA recipients. That's just the way that the administration prior to Trump decided to arbitrate who deserves to have temporary stay, right? But because of that, you know, a lot of the discourse, a lot of the conversations that we have on DACA sort of champion this superheroine type of DACA student that turns in papers without papers, you know, that does all these incredible things as an activist. So we have to have a right, you know, they almost have to do over the top Herculean efforts to deserve the same chance. But that already ignores so many of the parents, the people who just work 2 jobs, who like eating Doritos at 11 p.m., you know, that aren't these necessarily doing, you know, sexy work, right? But do they deserve a chance too, right? How are we including them in the conversation? How are we representing them? How are Black DACA recipients not being talked about, right? Or Chinese or Asian, or just, you know, it's not just a Latino thing. And I think it's a testament to the diversity, but the wide range of backgrounds in this panel that it can't just be a brown thing, you know, because if it is, then it starts becoming echo chambers. Then we just get caught up in, you know, we're performing the same trauma. So I'll end by just saying the issue, we also have to keep in mind, who are we talking about when we say DACA recipients? And how many people are we excluding in the conversation? You know, it shouldn't be an elite club. So let's always be vigilant to make sure we try to enfranchise more people.
I don't know if one of you guys do that.
So additionally, like along with the fear, like the thing that really struck me first, well, not exactly personally, but when I worked closely with some ESL teachers back home, and when I worked with these teachers, when Trump got elected, I feel like most of the fear and everything that came abroad when Trump was elected. And we had these young kids who were scared to come to school because Trump was elected. Like before DACA was rescinded, these just with like the rhetoric that goes a part of his speech and everything, it allows like these young kids not to be able to have an education. They were scared to go to school because of their families or the situations that they were in.
Just to add on to what everyone's saying, like the rhetoric around immigration makes it feel like there's an in-group and an out-group, and that like because you don't fit in that in-group, like you can no longer be a part of this community. And like personally, that affects me because I'm someone who back home and here works towards making every community I'm a part of more inclusive. And I feel like that's just an obligation, not only as a minority who like also goes through her own struggles, but just as a person in general, knowing that like people, not like, oh, this person is a friend, this person is a family member, like people in our community are going through struggles is enough to know that like you have a role in changing what is happening on this campus and like in the nation. Like people often don't know that like voting is like one of the ways that you can also get involved. Like there are different things you can do and people are just too afraid to ask. And if you put yourself in a position to be like, let me help, let me like reach out to people, let me be active in like activism, then you see the change that makes these spaces so inclusive. But if you sit behind like a closed door and say like, well, there's nothing I can do because I can't identify with these struggles, then like you just allow the system to perpetuate oppression. And I refuse to allow that to happen. So like, yeah, that's just.
And to kind of go from that, I mean, I want to just ask most of you before we hand over to Maggie, and hopefully we can speak to them. Do you guys have hope? You know, is there kind of like a better aspect of this issue in seeing youth stepping up and seeing, you know, even with issues of gun control, Black Lives Matter, and seeing youth at the forefront of any of these issues? And that can be
I wish you guys were there yesterday when we were in front of the DC Plaza and we like literally saw various people just like drawn towards these poster boards and like really interested in what Define American is. And like I did not think so many people would come to us and be like, hey, like explain to me what this is. Like I want to know more about it. And I feel like as students, sometimes we forget that like, yes, we have this academic life that we are a part of, but we are part of a community so much bigger than you. Like we go home and like we have this like privilege to be able to get the knowledge we have here and like take it back. So I thought it was amazing to see students like picking up pamphlets and like taking pictures of the posters and like sharing with their friends, because it really showed that like this is a community that wants to know more about minorities on campus and wants to do more to like inform themselves.
What makes me hopeful is that it's not only the people who are affected by this issue that care about it now, like my friend does right here. And it makes me really happy to see them supporting me and to see that they care about this issue even though it doesn't affect them and all of them. And like it just makes me really happy that this movement is garnering support beyond those people that it affects and that they care about it too and that they're willing to work and use their voice.
Just want to say something very briefly to give like my experience of activism. Speaking to what Elizabeth was saying earlier about the administration, you know, when we created meetings with like the head of admissions or with other folks who were supposed to know the numbers, you know, of how many document students were there actually were, you would get all the different departments and all the heads, and they would have a conversation, and they all had different figures, right? So what I'm trying to say is, it sort of got to the students out here, this sort of Gothic architecture that says, oh, we have it all, we have this money, we have this image. Like, they're not as scary as you think. People who necessarily run the school. And you have so much voice and privilege as students to speak out, to, you know, pass out flyers, to be active, be involved, you know, be on the front lines. Some people out here were talking about the fear of being deported, but many of, you know, even Duke students here, there is some insulation. So just take advantage of that and really try to find that calling, find the privileges you can invoke and leverage that others can't to make yourself most useful in the struggle.
You have any questions maybe for people or take over?
Close it and then I can take over. Yeah. Well, I mean, everything that you all have shared, I mean, it's really important and I appreciate it to see what's going on this side as well after 10 years of being in Mexico already. I mean, I up today on the news and my family, my sibling and my sister-in-law have DACA and it's something that is really close to me as well, even though I've been in Mexico for 10 years. But now I want to switch a little bit to the other side of the border. And part of the objective of also this trip, as I mentioned before, to be able to have a space to talk about what happens post-deportation and what happens post-return. And the reason why we're trying so hard to connect them is because they were supposed to be here. So I think that's important that we give it the last try so that they can connect and you can hear them. But I'll start talking a little bit about several of the things that we're working on. For example, well, the community, as you know, we're a community and people that we were born in Mexico, like many of you. We grew up here in the United States, like many of you. But the difference is that we have been in Mexico because of deportation, the deportation of a family member, or because of the various obstacles that we are forced to return. It's also not that we want to return. It's that we're forced by a system, and there's a lot of factors, like me growing up in Georgia in 2008 with the economic crisis, and the rates and everything going on in a state like Georgia. I mean, the only option was that, to go back at that moment. And it's sad to see that 10 years after, the situation is still going on. But I want us to transport a little bit to the other side of the border. And I've told you a little bit about what it means to arrive to the airport, deported and returned, and what it's not working from the government on the Mexican side. But as well, I would like to share with you all, as you all talked about including others and what the term dreamer has become and what it excludes, and the importance of also talking about those people that did not qualify for DACA because of something so minimum. As well, I would like for you to go to the other side of the border for a little moment and sort of try to see what people are feeling on the other side when we hear, I don't know, when we hear sometimes if someone could be deported, we're thinking, okay, wait, people have already been deported. When we hear about, I mean, I can understand the fear of a possible deportation, that maybe that's why we can't talk about it on this side. But for the people that are in the shadows, in a little pueblito, in Zacatecas, and wherever, and they think they're the only ones, and they hear on the news talking a lot about dreamers, okay, yes, but what happens to them when they don't have faith of ever going back to their family, of ever going back to their parents, to their kids? I know people in Ola that they have 3 kids or more kids and they haven't seen them, and they're separated, and they also are going to keep fighting for that mobility, and we all want that mobility. And even on this side, I mean, I imagine many of you would like to go back, be able to go to Mexico and go back and forth. So I think first is recognizing that people are in exile in Mexico, and even on this side at some point too, where we can't have that mobility that a lot of people maybe here. It's very easy to travel to another country, and other people like us, we can't. And for example, I acquired this mobility 2 years ago, and that also created a commitment and a responsibility that I have to give a voice to that community that is in exile in Mexico and that they can't be here. And that's why Bocha House, I mean, maybe many of you have heard the term Bocha here in the US. It has a very different meaning in Mexico for our community. When we were able to finally have a physical space, we made a survey and we asked people, returned and deported community, how they wanted to call it. And many of them started to say Bocha. Bocha, okay. Because the first day that I arrived to Mexico, somebody called me a Bocha. They said, don't speak Bocha or don't be a Bocha. And I didn't understand what that meant. But then more and more of us started to remember that a lot of us, we had heard it at least once going back to Mexico. And it might have a negative sort of effect. But in Mexico, some of us and the ones that are actively in Ola and we're part of the community, we want to reappropriate that term because we know that we can identify and we can know that word. And that's why we're using Bocha or Pocho to name this physical place that is now our safe space. It's a space where you can go and speak Spanish. You can see that allá, you can see the currents of the world. People are putting their license plates, hanging, they're putting their pictures of being here in the US. It's a place where they're not going to be discriminated, or they're not going to be told, you look Mexican, why are you speaking perfect English? And I think that this is a place where we're going to strengthen a movement in Mexico of a community that has been in exile and that it has been there, but we definitely need the support of this side as well, where you can talk about what's going on in Mexico, where we can widen the perception of also seeing, okay, what's going on in Mexico? What's that about the internal security law that it's going to put the army and the Mexican army on the streets, and they're going to silence all the people, like many of people here could be deported or returned to Mexico, and Mexico is preparing to silence our voices because they know that we're going to arrive to Mexico to demand, just like we're used to doing it here. So there are many issues that affect both of us, and I think it's moment to be stronger. And in Bocha House, we're doing many workshops. We also understand that going back to Mexico, it's not enough to have policies. Mexico needs a transformation. You need a salary, better salaries. You need, I mean, people can't even think of having a family reunification in Mexico because they can't afford a living. And those are, I mean, just one example of many things that we acknowledge that Mexico needs. And I think going back to Mexico, at least for me, has meant that Mexico needs me as well, and that there are a lot of violations, and that there are a lot of type of people migrating, Central Americans, people from other countries that are going through Mexico as well. And I think that's one thing that Bocha House is doing. And a lot of people as well with DACA have reached out more and more to us. And they have even said, I mean, I feel a little bit relieved that there is Bocha House because there's a place that I can arrive. Not like many of us, that I arrived 10 years ago and nobody knew about deportation or return. Now I think we have continued to advance a little bit, tiny by tiny, and telling you the reality. We're willing to tell you, you know what, this is going on in Mexico. know what, this is the reality of Mexico, and it might not be easy, it's gonna be hard, but you're not gonna do it alone. There's a community there that is organizing, and if we support each other in campaigns and funds and all sorts of things that we can work together, especially to make demands in the Mexican consulate, in Mexico as well, that will be something that will really contribute to strengthening. And the second thing I really want to talk about is that this event was also designed for Rosie and Ivan to be here physically. They were supposed to be here because Duke extended an invitation, just like I did 2 years ago. I acquired my mobility through a university that sponsored me, and I went to the U.S. Embassy, and I was pretty privileged enough to get an agent that had a really great sleep the night before that gave me the visa. But we did the same thing this year with the support of allies and others like the attorney Carlos and the help of others. We want to continue this mobility project where we're going to support people to go to the U.S. Embassy and request their mobility. And they're doing it by saying the truth, by doing it the right way, which is going to the U.S. Embassy and requesting it. And we started this year with Duke University. We really appreciate the letter of invitation that we got. And I went with Rosie and Ivan to Guadalajara. Rosie came back or went back to Mexico when she was 18. She is a sociologist now. She's the coordinator of education. She has really strong ties to Mexico. And Ivan is going to college as well. He came back when he was 18 as well. He went back to Mexico when he was 18 as well. He's studying college. He also has strong ties to Mexico. And they were both, as I said, invited to present here to talk about their biographical experiences, to use them as tools. And we went to the U.S. Embassy. They went at the same time. One was in window 1, one was in window 5. They faced the U.S. Embassy and the agents, and one of them was told, you were 18 when you came back from the U.S. And you were old enough to know that you were there illegally. So if you went back to Mexico in 2012, I'm going to give you a 10-year ban. You paid me $160. You gave me your biometrics. You were completely honest. In exchange of that, I'm giving you a 10-year ban from even trying to attempt reapplying again. That's what Ivan got as a response. Rosie was at the same place on window 5, and she was told, you know what, you were 18 when you were in the U.S. You were still 18, and you went back to Mexico, so you don't have a ban. You were 18. You didn't have any undocumented presence in the U.S., so you don't have a ban. You can reapply in 6 months again. I still consider that you don't deserve to go back to the U.S., but I'm not going to give you a ban. And that happened at the same time, just 4 windows of difference. And it's amazing how the government has that authority and that power to decide if he or she thinks that a person deserves to have this mobility, to give a presentation, to expose, to talk about their work and their career and their major and everything they're doing in Mexico. I think it's just incredible that they don't have access to that mobility. And that's why I'm here today talking about Rosie and about Ivan, because I know that they were supposed to be here. And I think that's important to have clear for us that there's an entire community in exile. There's an entire community over there. And there are many factors as well. I mean, what if you grew up in Utah and you get deported to Mexico City? It's going to be different, the effect. What if you go back by yourself? What if you go back with family? I mean, I think we need to step a little bit away from our U.S. moment, which I know it's very important. And as I said, I want to support and we want to support in all that everyone we can through our experience. Maybe it took me 5 years to revalidate my education, but now through the work that has been done by grassroots organizations and allies, you should, if you go back to Mexico, you should be able to revalidate in 15 days your education to continue. That's just one example, but I think through our experiences, we can support people that are going to go back so that it can be a little bit easier than how it was for us. But we can only accomplish that by working together and be stronger together and demand together on both sides of the border. We need to see this as a wider perspective. It's not only the US, now it's Mexico, and our families are currently separated. And how are we gonna be together? By fighting for both places. And I think that's part of our, what we wanna do this year as well, to create awareness, come to the universities again with a clear message of what we need at ODA, and also how we can work together. And for you to tell us, yes, I'm willing to talk about what happens post-deportation. I'm willing to eventually, we need to organize. I'm willing to put it in Washington, D.C. as well. I've never heard nobody talk about post-deportation or what's happening in Washington in any legislation. And I think it's the moment. There's definitely a lot to do, but it's the moment to work together and to fight for this. So that's a little bit about my message. One last try. Okay.
All right, we're gonna try one last time, just concluding thoughts from Pocha House. I think that the fact that they weren't able to be here and technology did not work in our favor. In many ways, brings down. I don't think they can hear us. This is, it's almost a lesson of what it's like to live across a militarized border, right? You can't rely on technology.
Okay. ¿Podemos intervenir ya? Okay. Bueno, yo al menos sí voy a hacer uso del traductor.
Do we have any, if you don't understand, actually maybe we should do consecutive translation. You have to do Spanish, right? Do we have translate to English, or maybe we should just do consecutive translation? Yeah, quickly, those who don't speak Spanish, can you grab that number while we'll see? Want to grab one and hand them out? So that you can the long-awaited finale now at Pocha House. It's about to begin. Well, while we're here, I just want to explain a little bit of the behind the scenes, because I think it's important that actually, so in addition to the technological difficulties, that I remember one young woman that, in my process of research, I remember she said, I've been reduced to the square on the Skype screen of my family. That's how I exist to them. That's how we've connected now for, she's going on 7 years of having a relationship via a computer screen. And so she was very articulate about that, but also in addition to the technological challenges, half of our team actually left in the middle. I don't know if you guys saw that, because two people who were deported and homeless in Mexico City came to Pocha House, and they're helping them find a place to stay, get their letter of repatriation so they can start trying to take advantage of what little services there are. So we've been, are they ready? So that in part was one of our challenges in this very moment, which I think it's important to recognize. You ready now? All right.
Hola, ¿quién es traductor? Soy Rosy, I'm a returnee since 2009. Bueno, soy originaria de una comunidad indígena de Oaxaca, entonces tengo una dinámica muy única en cuestión de migración de retorno. Bueno, como introducción puedo dar esta semblanza, ¿no? Soy una migrante de retorno, indígena, y además de eso, pues europea. Mi retorno fue en el 2009, ya voy a cumplir 9 años el 12 de julio de este año. Bueno, la dinámica aquí con ODA, lo que ha sucedido es que me sumo a este movimiento como lo que es una lucha, donde se reivindican muchas otras luchas, no solamente desde la perspectiva de las juventudes, no pensamos nada más en la migración de retorno o la deportación de personas jóvenes, sino bien pensamos en cuestiones de realidades sociales, lo que puede marcar la deportación. Aquí no usamos cuestiones retóricas ni metafóricas de decir que el sueño americano, eso creo que está sobreusado, lo he dicho muchas veces, el sueño americano creo que es algo que hay que deshacerse. Eso creo que para muchos va a ser un tanto, no sé, puede ser ofensivo, puede que no, pero creo que es un término que fue usado en los 1800s, cuando estaba todo este movimiento de los europeos migrando hacia Estados Unidos. Creo que es un término que está sobreusado, entonces realmente eso es como la posición que tengo yo. Y recuperando un poco sobre esto de no poder estar con ustedes en Zoom esta vez, fue una experiencia que va más allá de algo personal, fue un episodio que marcó al movimiento que se está sucediendo aquí en México, que tiene mucho que ver con Otros en Acción y UNC-Chapel, sobre todo este espacio físico, que quizá para ustedes podría estar un poco vacío, pero está muy lleno de cuestiones filiales, de cuestiones de fobias, de miedos, de tristezas, de enojos, pero sobre todo de lucha y de saber que podemos nosotros avanzar sobre reivindicaciones personales, no tomar nuestras historias como testimonio. Yo no soy un testimonio, ninguna de las personas dentro de este espacio da testimonio. Nosotros queremos dar más allá que eso, sino que usar nuestras experiencias, nuestras trayectorias biográficas, porque nosotros somos procesos, no solamente personales, sino procesos mundiales, procesos sociales, lingüísticos, educativos y de violencia también, y a partir de esos procesos nosotros somos eso. Somos trayectorias biográficas que estamos tomando como tal, y con eso tomamos nuestra experiencia como herramienta de cambio, como herramienta de agencia, porque todos tenemos esa capacidad de agencia. Si bien los sistemas, tanto el sistema estadounidense, el sistema mexicano, o cualquier otro sistema nacional, porque esto tiene que ver mucho con cuestiones de Estado-nación, puedes ser un dreamer colombiano, coreano, o quizá uno de Kenia, pero lo que te marca ahí son estos sistemas. Entonces, lo que nosotros vemos en este espacio y lo que representamos como ODA, lo que representa G, lo que representa Mary, Enrique, Iván, cada uno de nosotros que ocupamos este espacio, es eso, es una lucha en donde el hecho de que a mí me hayan negado el B1 visa, lo que reflexionamos es la cuestión racista, y sobre todo esa cuestión arbitraria en cómo se maneja la actividad y la movilidad humana. Entonces, en ese sentido, lo que me gustaría como aportar desde esta experiencia del 12 de febrero, justamente el 12 de febrero, donde nos negaron nuestras visas, es eso, hacer mención de que nosotros hemos estado aquí desde hace más de 10 años, algunos han estado hace más de 15 años. Las temporalidades en este sentido tienen mucha importancia por el hecho de que eso nos puede dar voz, eso puede sacarnos de la opacidad, porque en estos momentos esto es como estamos en modo opaco, o sea, no tenemos tintes oscuros porque nunca vamos a llegar a la oscuridad nosotros como movimiento, pero tampoco tenemos esas cuestiones metafóricas que te decía, ¿no? Que hay una luz al final del túnel. Creo que hay que desvanecernos de esas cuestiones, no tomar el término de que puede haber una luz al final del túnel, sino bien, están tus derechos ahí, y entonces es ahí donde tú vas a reclamar. Y algo que pues exhorto a todos, o llamo la atención a cada uno de ustedes que se encuentran ahí presentes, es el hecho de que se sumen a este movimiento. Si bien yo realmente celebro el movimiento Dreamer, celebro todos los movimientos con los que se están uniendo ustedes, pero siento la necesidad de que el movimiento de ustedes se sume al nuestro, porque nosotros, a partir de ustedes, estamos siendo marcados aquí en México. Sabemos de muchos programas que dicen, bienvenidos Dreamers, pero ¿qué ha sucedido con los jóvenes que no entraron a este programa, no pudieron entrar a DACA, sobre todo regresaron o fueron deportados antes de 2012, antes de este decreto presidencial de Obama? ¿Qué sucedió con ellos? Y entonces lo que sucede aquí con nosotros es el hecho de que nos ponen en contraparte. Empiezan a decir, ¿por qué a los Dreamers sí se les da la oportunidad y a nosotros como mexicanos, a las personas que no vivieron en Estados Unidos, porque ellos se sienten excluidos, de que el gobierno supuestamente les está dando programas? Eso es absurdo, no existen esos programas. Entonces lo que necesitamos es el diálogo entre nosotros. Eso es lo que yo exijo de cada uno de ustedes, y es una exigencia también propia de nosotros acá como movimiento, y a partir de eso creo que podemos crear estos grandes puentes, porque no podemos llamarnos ni binacionales, porque no existe. Nosotros vamos más allá de cuestiones nacionales, y lo que pido es eso, ¿no? Que retomemos nuestras experiencias, el hecho de que nosotros no tenemos esa movilidad, que ustedes reclamen desde Estados Unidos, porque ustedes ahorita están en la lupa de todos los medios. Entonces, solo si ustedes dan la voz a aquellos que ya tenemos aquí años o algunos meses, que justamente tenemos personas en estos momentos que acaban de llegar justo hoy al aeropuerto. En el aeropuerto, como bien lo mencionó Mari, vamos a hacer la recepción, el acompañamiento y apoyo de personas que están siendo repatriadas en el aeropuerto. Entonces, hoy justo estoy viviendo esa realidad. Ustedes quizás no lo ven, pero está esta realidad latente. Entonces, consideren no solamente el hecho de querer quedarse allá, sino consideren que puede haber la posibilidad de que sean deportados. Es a partir de ahí que ustedes van a tener una plataforma, porque nosotros somos una plataforma para ustedes. Y es a partir de este trabajo en conjunto que yo les pido a cada uno de ustedes, quizá no sean Dreamers, quizá no estén dentro de esta norma de jóvenes sobresalientes y todo, pero consideren también a otras poblaciones, porque nosotros como movimiento consideramos no solamente a personas refugiadas y retornadas, sino también consideramos a personas en movilidad humana, personas refugiadas, personas desplazadas. Entonces, a lo que llamo es eso, a que se abran más allá del espacio estadounidense, porque solamente así nosotros podremos lograr esas exigencias que nosotros estamos haciendo aquí. Nosotros estamos exigiendo derechos para ustedes también, pero la verdad yo he sentido durante este tiempo, estos años, el silencio de ustedes para aquellos que han sido deportados. Entonces realmente no es un reclamo, simplemente creo que quiero remarcar en cada uno de ustedes y hacerles saber que nuestras trayectorias geográficas son muy similares, que ustedes todavía continúan allá y que es padre eso. Entonces eso es lo único que les podría decir, y quizá Iván si puede ahondar un poco más en la experiencia de la negación de visa, y lo mío fue un poco más, pues, no sé, exhortándoles sobre todo a esta contribución, a esta vinculación y creación de puentes, porque hay que irnos más allá de las cuestiones metafóricas, como les digo, ¿no? Entonces, sí, nos llama a la acción, como tal, lo dice el nombre de nuestra organización, porque sé que tenemos esa capacidad de ustedes no han logrado allá, pero no, a lo que los exhorto es que nos vinculemos, porque solamente así nosotros acá nos vamos a fortalecer con ustedes. Gracias.
Bueno, antes que nada, hola a todos. Hi everyone there. First of all, I want to thank the group for inviting me in. Sadly, I couldn't make it. Again, thank you for doing this. Primero que nada, empezar con todo lo que he mencionado en este momento. She has a point. Mobility is a right. I pretty much did a comment on Facebook, which kind of sums it up. And that is that mobility should be a right given by birth, given by freedom, etc. It shouldn't be by place of birth. I always say this because where I live, Mexico, is a place of a bunch of realities that we don't really know about. I went to the US in 2002. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I lived every single aspect of being an American, living as an American, doing the Pledge of Allegiance, everything that was made for an American kid, I lived it. And now that I'm back in Mexico, we face so many realities that we need to face. Like she said before, you guys are the open window for this. You can make a change because you're over there and you can see the reality before it hits. We are here facing everything. I'm pretty much new to this, but what people do here when they come, it's pretty much a very, very hard type of process. There is no way of getting your stuff, of calling a family member. It's hard. I haven't been to the airport lately, but I can see how this is the reality because I was one of those kids that came back. At the age of 18, when I arrived, there was no support. And the things that we got were pretty much a picture with the government. You're different, you're a phenomenon because they didn't know how to face this issue. And I'm facing this from my group. When I came, SED, which is the Secretaría de Educación Pública in Mexico, they didn't know how to face the reality of the kid coming with different studies in the US. They didn't even know what was some class credits, like for example, AP classes, college courses in high school. So what I faced was confusion. And in this whole process, I realized that I was alone. That was the key element to myself. I got into depression. I felt like there was nothing I could do here. But all of a sudden, when I tried to apply for college, taking the exams, taking every course I could, I find out that ODA is an organization that's fighting for me. I could say I came in a little bit late, but I'm actually proud to say that I came at a time where changes are happening. But right now we're facing a precedent that's going back hundreds of years back, where we can think that 21st century is the time of change, where everything could be possible, and yet we're facing here elections in Italy, in France, and now we're facing a reality with Trump, where we're literally going backwards. So what I'm doing right now is facing a reality in Mexico, in a hostile place, where people that come here, they face this whole thing that they're called phenomena, neighbors, whatever you want to call it. They don't know how to respond to this reality. So again, you guys are facing this. You're the key to this, like Rosie said before. And what I want to mention right now is some phenomena that we face here when we come back is identity. We don't really know who we are. In my case, I didn't know what it was. Was I a Mexican, an American? I really didn't know. And as Matt talked about it, when you come here and speak English, it's so awkward because people don't know how to face it together. We are used to think that when you're in the US, everything is going to be settled. But when you come back to face reality in Mexico, it's a whole different game. People don't know how to respond to it. Your own family members don't know who you are. They could probably say that you were a kid that grew up in the Golden State in New York, or etc. They don't really know what reality is facing. I worked at the age of 13 years of age. I went to work in the pizzeria. And the reason was because my parents couldn't handle all the payments, the rent, etc. I come back here because the reality is the world is very, very hostile, no matter where you are. But this is the thing that I want to talk about. Most of us, when we come back, we don't know how to respond. And if the government doesn't know how to respond to us, we're going to get lost. So here's the thing. To all those people that have DACA, you guys have the key. Right now, I didn't get it. I came back a year before it. I came in 2011. In 2012, this was given. I already had taken college classes, college courses, high school, and it was a hit. It was a really bad hit for me. But then I see this whole thing with my little cousins. They have DACA now, and I'm so proud of them because they're part of the movement now. My cousin who has DACA told me, "How are you doing over there? How was Mexico?" And I said to them, it's hostile. It is. There's a lot of realities. Indigenous people, there's people in the streets, like Maggie said. It's really hard for us to pay for college or an apartment. But the thing is, what I told them is keep on fighting because you're part of the movement. DACA was part of this movement. What I did, what you're doing, is part of this movement. And right now, mobility is the key. We need mobility. My process with visa was the key element that I needed. I needed to see this firsthand. And I can say this, not only for me, but for everyone that went in this process. It was a hard process to face because we had to face reality. We're not criminals. We just want a freedom of movement, which is called mobility. There shouldn't be anything stopping us from moving. This is a given right by birth. Everyone should have mobility. And what we're facing now is exactly that. So to talk a lot, I just want to say, keep on moving, just joining the movement again. And the key is there, mobility. Just keep on supporting it. And here is Pocha House. So again, I want to say thank you to you for not being there right now physically, but you guys giving me the chance to be here. It's an honor. So thank you so much, and we're here for you.
Yeah, I think we wanted to finish up and then thank everyone. I think what they said was great. They kind of gave us something for even us streamers, something to do, something to take into consideration. I don't know if BD or anybody else from like the American had some either action steps that people can take, especially to support what you're specifically doing.
Yeah, we do have a sign-up sheet that we passed around. Please do sign up if you want to volunteer with us. We have an orientation coming up on the 18th. And right now, one of the biggest things is port accompaniment and ICE check-in accompaniment. Lots of like faith folks, church folks are plugging into that. Please sign up if you can. And then there's also other stuff that we need support with. So sign up. We'll be in touch. And yeah, other than that, there's just obviously tons of cases, and what we want to do is avoid people getting to that point. And if we can, then we should. So thank you.
And well, another thing that you all can do right now is we have t-shirts from ODA, which are Otros and Acción, with the message de aquí de allá. And they're made by Deportación en la lucha, which is kind of our parents that were deported, the generation of our parents, and they came up with a print shop where they support each other, and that's how they're trying to get enough money to reunite with their children who are here in the U.S. So they make these t-shirts. They have here Deportados brand, which is their brand for t-shirts, and you can support buying one for $15 for ODA and as well for them, so that we can keep ordering t-shirts from them. And yeah, $15 each, and you can come here you could do it by PayPal or cash, and you could sign up as well if you're interested in getting information about the campaigns, the next events we're gonna go, other universities, and how you could even tweet, Facebook, share if we have any sort of GoFund, any sort of campaign, and this is the sign-in sheet and the t-shirts. I really don't wanna take them back.
Have any further questions? If you'd like to mingle, ask some of us questions. We thank you. The Fine Americans get to do a lot more here on campus. Next year, we're hoping to do a kind of conference, a chapters conference, and that's going to be a big event. And we're trying to have people vote. I think today they're going to decide whether it's going to be held here, a chapter summit. We have on our Facebook page a link where you can vote. But other than that, just please come out and support whenever we do something else. Come out and talk to us. We have meetings every Thursdays as well in Frito 216. But thank you all. Appreciate it. Appreciate you guys staying all the time.
And see you tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow here as well.
Already